March 15th, 1969. CBS Television City, Los Angeles. The man who never cried on screen, the coldest gunslinger in Hollywood history, was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. And it would all happen because of 3 words he whispered to Elvis Presley. Clint Eastwood had just walked onto the set of Elvis's legendary comeback special. The cameras had stopped rolling hours ago. The audience had gone home. But something was about to happen that would shake both men to their core. Clint looked at Elvis, the king of rock and roll, the man who had everything, and saw something nobody else could see. Behind the black leather, behind the famous smile, behind the swagger that had made him the most famous entertainer on earth, Clint saw a man who was dying inside. And so he did something that went against everything he stood for. The man with no name, the actor who had built his entire legend on silence and steel, opened his mouth and issued a dare. He dared Elvis Presley to sing gospel, not for the fans, not for the cameras, not for fame or money or applause. For his mama. What happened next brought the toughest cowboy in Hollywood to his knees. It made Elvis Presley weep like he hadn't wept in 11 years. And it created a moment so raw, so sacred, so devastatingly human, that CBS executives immediately ordered the footage locked in a vault, marked with 3 words: never release this. For over 5 decades, only a handful of people knew what really happened that night. The secret was buried with both legends. Until now. But before I tell you what Clint whispered to Elvis and why it destroyed them both, you need to understand the wound these 2 men shared. A wound that had been bleeding in silence for years. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And welcome to Starred Secrets. In the early 1960s, 2 men worked on neighboring soundstages at Paramount Studios. One was already the biggest name in music. The other was a struggling television actor nobody expected to amount to much. Elvis Presley was filming his Hollywood musicals, churning out movie after movie, trapped in contracts he hated. Clint Eastwood was shooting Rawhide, a Western series that barely paid the bills. But between takes, something unexpected happened. These 2 men, complete opposites in every way, became friends. "I was always wearing a gun," Clint later recalled. "Elvis loved to do fast draws, so we always did fast draws together." Picture it. The future king of rock and roll and the future man with no name standing in the California sun, practicing quick draw like 2 kids playing cowboys. Nobody watching would have guessed that both men were hiding the same secret pain. Elvis had lost his mother Gladys on August 14, 1958. She was only 46 years old. A heart attack took her while Elvis was serving in the army, thousands of miles away. He'd rushed home, but it was too late. At her funeral, Elvis collapsed. He threw himself on her casket, sobbing so hard they had to pull him away. "Everything I have is gone," he cried. "She was all I lived for." Gladys had raised Elvis on gospel music in their tiny Tupelo home. She'd taken him to church, filled their house with hymns, taught him that his voice was a gift from God. Since her death, Elvis couldn't sing gospel without breaking apart. So he stopped. He buried that part of himself with her. Clint understood this kind of love. His mother Ruth had given him music too. Fats Waller records spinning on the family phonograph, her gentle encouragement when he taught himself piano. She believed in him before anyone else did. Both men had been shaped by their mothers. Both men carried that love like a weight they could never set down. But here's what nobody knew. By 1969, Elvis wasn't just grieving anymore. He was drowning, and Clint could see it, even when no one else could. What Clint was about to do would either save Elvis's life or destroy their friendship forever. He had no way of knowing which. The soundstage was nearly empty now. Elvis sat alone in a folding chair, still wearing the black leather suit from his comeback performance. His hands were trembling. His eyes looked hollow. The show had been a triumph. Critics were already calling it the greatest comeback in entertainment history. But Elvis felt nothing. Clint walked across the empty stage, his boots echoing in the silence. He pulled up a chair and sat down across from the king. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Clint said quietly, "You're not okay, are you?" Elvis forced a smile. "What are you talking about, man? Did you see that show? They loved it." "They loved the performance," Clint said. "But I'm not asking about the performance. I'm asking about you." Elvis's smile faded. His jaw tightened. Nobody talked to him like this. Not his manager, not his friends, not anyone. "I'm fine," Elvis said, but his voice cracked on the word. Clint leaned forward. "When's the last time you sang gospel, Elvis?" The question hit like a bullet. Elvis looked away. "I don't do that anymore." "Why not?" Silence. "Because she's gone," Elvis finally whispered. "And every time I try to sing those songs, I hear her voice instead of mine. I feel her standing next to me. And I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't do it without falling apart." Clint nodded slowly. He understood exactly what Elvis meant. Then he did something that shocked them both. "I dare you," Clint said. Elvis looked up. "What?" "I dare you to sing gospel. Right here, right now. No band, no microphone, no audience. Just you and God, and whatever's left of that boy from Tupelo." "Clint, I can't. I dare you to sing for her, Elvis." Clint's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Sing for Gladys. Because I think you've been holding your breath for 11 years. And I think if you don't let this out, it's going to kill you." The mention of his mother's name broke something inside Elvis. His eyes filled with tears. His whole body started trembling. 11 years of grief, locked away, pushed down, never allowed to surface, suddenly pressed against his chest like a crushing weight. Elvis stood up slowly. The air in the room changed. And Clint Eastwood, the man who never showed emotion, felt his own heart start to pound. Because he suddenly realized he had no idea what he had just unleashed. What happened next would change both men forever. Elvis walked to the center of the empty stage. No spotlight, no band, no screaming fans. Just a man standing alone in the dim light, about to face the ghost he had been running from for over a decade. He closed his eyes, and suddenly he was back in Tupelo, Mississippi, 7 years old, standing in the First Assembly of God Church on a sweltering Sunday morning. He could smell the old wooden pews, feel the humid air pressing against his skin, hear the congregation singing, and above all those voices, one voice rising clearer than the rest. His mama's voice. "Elvis," she used to tell him, "God gave you that voice for a reason. Don't you ever forget where it came from. Don't you ever forget who you really are." Standing on that empty CBS soundstage, Elvis opened his mouth, and he began to sing, "How Great Thou Art." The first note came out broken, cracked, barely a whisper, but he kept going. Each word carried 11 years of grief. Each phrase held memories he had tried to bury, her laugh, her touch, the way she called him "my baby," even when he was a grown man, the way she looked at him like he was still that little boy in Tupelo, no matter how famous he became. Clint stood at the edge of the stage watching, and within 30 seconds, something impossible happened. The man with no name, the actor who had built his entire career on being unbreakable, felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He couldn't move. Because what he was witnessing wasn't a performance. It was a man finally letting himself grieve, finally letting himself feel the loss he had been running from since that terrible August morning in 1958. Elvis's voice grew stronger. The cracks began to heal. It was like watching a wound finally allowed to breathe after being bandaged too tightly for too long. By the second verse, Elvis was singing full voice, raw, powerful, completely unguarded. And then Clint did something he never planned to do. He walked onto the stage. He stood beside Elvis, and he started singing harmony. Clint's voice was rough, unpracticed, nothing like Elvis's instrument, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that Elvis wasn't alone anymore. Two broken men standing together, holding each other up through the only language strong enough to carry their pain. The few people still in the building stopped what they were doing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They stood frozen, watching two American legends stripped of everything except truth. When the song ended, the silence was absolute. Elvis stood there, tears streaming down his face, his chest heaving. And then he turned to Clint. Their eyes met, and Elvis whispered three words that Clint Eastwood would carry with him for the rest of his life. Three words that explained why this footage could never be released. Three words that revealed just how close Elvis Presley had been to the edge, and how this moment had pulled him back. What Elvis said would remain a secret for decades, but the impact of those three words changed everything. You saved me. That's what Elvis whispered. Three words. That's all it took to break Clint Eastwood completely. The toughest man in Hollywood, the gunslinger who had stared down death in a dozen films without flinching, felt his knees go weak. He reached out and grabbed Elvis's shoulder just to stay standing. What do you mean? Clint asked, his voice rough. Elvis's face was wet with tears. His whole body was shaking. I mean, I was drowning, man. Every single day. I smile for the cameras, I shake my hips, I give them what they want, but inside? He pressed his fist against his chest. Inside, I've been dying since she left. And tonight? His voice cracked. Tonight's the first time in 11 years. I feel like I can breathe. Clint pulled Elvis into a hug. The king of rock and roll collapsed against the man with no name, sobbing like a child. They stood there, two of the biggest icons in American history, holding each other up in the middle of an empty soundstage. No cameras, no audience. Just two human beings who had finally found the courage to be broken in front of each other. Thank you, Elvis whispered. Thank you for daring me. Clint held him tighter. You saved me too, brother. I forgot what it felt like to let myself feel something real. My mama always said music could heal anything. I think she was right. When they finally stepped apart, Elvis wiped his face and let out a long, shaky breath. Then his expression changed. A flicker of fear crossed his eyes. Clint, the cameras. Clint looked around. The recording equipment from the earlier special was still set up. The red lights were off, but some of the crew had stayed behind, and they had seen everything. That footage, Elvis said quietly. It can never get out. What just happened, that wasn't for them. It was for her. It was for us. Clint nodded. Then we bury it. That night, Elvis made a phone call to the network executives. He didn't explain, he didn't negotiate. He simply said, that footage from tonight, lock it away. Destroy it if you have to, but it never sees the light of day. CBS complied. The tape was sealed in a vault labeled with 3 words: "Never release this." Both men agreed never to speak publicly about what happened. It was their secret, a sacred moment between 2 wounded souls who had found healing in the most unexpected way. But what neither man knew was that this single night would quietly change the course of both their lives. In the years that followed, people close to Elvis noticed something different about him. He started singing gospel again, not for audiences, but for himself. Late at night at Graceland, he would sit at the piano and sing hymns until the sun came up. He talked about his mother more openly, sharing memories instead of hiding from the pain. Something shifted in him after that comeback special, one of his closest friends later said. I don't know what happened, but he seemed lighter, like he'd finally put something down that he'd been carrying for years. Elvis once told a confidant, "A real friend doesn't tell you what you want to hear. A real friend dares you to face the thing you're running from. That's the only way you heal." For Clint, the impact was just as profound, but he showed it differently. He poured everything he felt that night into his work. The films he directed in the years that followed were filled with broken men searching for redemption, characters who learned that true strength wasn't about hiding your pain, but having the courage to face it. In 1993, when Clint won the Academy Award for Unforgiven, he looked into the audience and saw his mother Ruth beaming at him from her seat. He told the world she was the most important woman in his life. But what no one knew was that in that moment, he was also thinking about Elvis, thinking about that night, thinking about what it meant to finally let yourself feel something completely. Both men carried that secret until the end. Elvis passed away in 1977. Clint never spoke about that night publicly, but the lesson they learned together lived on, in their music, in their art, and in the lives they touched. Some moments are too sacred for cameras. Some healings happen only in the dark. The footage from that night has never been released. Some say it still exists, buried deep in the CBS archives, waiting to be discovered. Others believe it was destroyed years ago, just as Elvis requested. But the truth of what happened doesn't need a tape to survive. It lives in the music Elvis recorded in his final years, gospel albums filled with a depth and emotion that hadn't been there before. It lives in the films Clint Eastwood created, stories of flawed men finding redemption through courage and vulnerability. And it lives in the lesson both men learned that night, that the bravest thing you can do isn't staying silent. It's letting yourself break. That grief doesn't go away when you bury it. It just waits until someone cares enough to dare you to face it. That healing doesn't happen alone. Sometimes it takes a friend who loves you enough to push you toward the pain you've been avoiding. Clint Eastwood dared Elvis Presley to sing gospel that night, and in doing so, he gave the king something more valuable than fame or fortune. He gave him permission to be human. 2 boys, 2 mothers, 2 legends. One from Tupelo, Mississippi, one from Oakland, California. Both believed that music could save a man's soul. And for one night, on an empty stage in Los Angeles, they proved it was true. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Thanks for watching Starred Secrets.